Sure. Oh, good. Where's
An adapter.
what does your computer have?
It's a.
Oh yeah, that's what mine is too. But is there no HDMI?
everyone hear me? No? No, really? Thank you, Professor Smith. Hi, my name is Dr. Victoria Terranova, and I'm from the Criminology and Criminal Justice Department here at UNC. And myself and Dr. Mike Kimball are very excited to introduce Dr. Michelle Chapman. She is here tonight presenting as part of our Schultz Speaker Series event. A little bit about the event before I get into a little bit about Dr. Chapman. The Schultz, Robert Schultz served as Dean of UNC's College of Arts and Sciences and was also a professor of sociology from 1972 until 1981, and as professor of sociology from 71 until he retired in 1987. He's known and loved for his remarkable wit, buoyant humor, and academic passion. As a strong believer in the importance of interdisciplinary work, he was instrumental in starting the Life of the Mind program, as well as programs in environmental studies, women's studies, Africana studies, and philosophy. He also supported the development of the University Lecture Series, which was the precursor to this event and the ones that have preceded it, the Schultz Speaker Series. So we're very grateful to have this opportunity and support from the university and the series. We are very pleased to have Dr. Michelle Chapman here to present as part of the Schultz Speaker Series. Dr. Chapman is an assistant professor in the Crime, Justice, and Security Studies program at the University of the District of Columbia. She earned her master's degree and doctorate in socioanthropology at American University. Her research focuses on gentrification and urban inequality, including the impact of gentrification on the Pan-American and Black nationalist communities in her hometown of Washington, D.C., as well as the intersection of contemplative practices, African spiritual wisdom, and Black youth justice. So there's a lot in there. Dr. Chapman also leads mindfulness and contemplative initiatives and offers contemplative pedagogy workshops for faculty. She uses contemplative approaches to support liberated learning environments that center healing, social justice, and community. She facilitates a weekly Mindful Monday drop-in session for the campus community at UDC, which sounds pretty cool. Dr. Chapman also serves on the board of directors of the Center of Contemplative Mind in Society and the Mindfulness in Education Network. She's a fellow in the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Interdisciplinary Research Leadership Program and co-PI of the Youth Mind Study, which takes a youth development approach that integrates culturally relevant mindfulness approaches, restorative justice, arts, and equity education to prevent youth violence and promote resilience among DC high school youth. That was a mouthful. All right. So Dr. Mike Kimball, I'll have him come up, and then we'll introduce Dr. Chapman. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. So yes, I have another little job to do here, which I'm very excited to do, and that is to present on behalf of our sponsors in our university a small gift to Dr. Chapman, who's busy having a more meaningful conversation right now. Dr. Chapman, can you please join me? She's not expecting this, so. We just have a small gift to give you.
I haven't done anything yet.
That's part of being contemplative.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so this is on behalf of the sponsors of this event and the sponsors of an event tomorrow, which is the Rocky Mountain Dialogues on Mindfulness in Higher Education. So the sponsors include, obviously, the Schultz Speaker Series, to which we're very grateful. UNC has an Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, which has co-sponsored this event. We also have a new university-level center that's that's kicking off tomorrow officially, called the Center for Applied Contemplative Studies here. And so on behalf of that center too, we are grateful for you joining us and sharing your wisdom with us. We have some external sponsors as well, and I know you're all going, would you just stop, give her the gift, and let her do the talking, because but I want to mention these sponsors because we're very grateful to them too. So it includes the Campus Compact of the Mountain West. It includes CU Boulder. It includes CSU and Naropa University. So all of these institutions, centers, offices, Programs like Schultz Speaker Series have been involved in making this possible, the event, and most especially tonight, Dr. Chapman's visit with us. So I'm going to present this small gift, a small token, and I'm going to actually open it rather than just give it to her and make her open it somewhere else. I'm just going to share what it is. This is a little bit of Southwest Colorado heritage right here that I want to share with you. And this is a small carving made by a Navajo craftsman whose name is listed here, so you'll know who it actually is. And we just wanted to present this carving to you as a small token of our appreciation.
I have to get my notes. Good evening. Oh, come on now. Hey. Please join me in thanking Dr. Kimball, Dr. Terranova, and everyone who made this event possible. This is really incredible. I want to ask that you please help me thank them with a warm round of applause. This is so special. I'm so delighted to be here and to speak to a room full of students on a Friday night. What? Give yourselves a hand. Come on, pat yourselves on the shoulder. Give yourselves a clap. Do a little something for yourselves. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we're going to get started with a little call and response. Anyone know what call and response is? Yeah? Can you shout it out? This is what college will do for you. Stay in school. Yes. So I'm going to give a call, and I would like you to respond to the call, okay? Hello. This is not a competition. There's no right or no. Everyone has a beautiful voice if you have a voice, okay? Or you can just give it up with your heart, okay? So I need to hear your voices. I need this a little bit because it's been a long day. Hello. We're going to do it a couple more times. So, you know, this is what life is about. You just keep trying, okay? Hello. Hello. You're sounding better. Hello. Oh, now you got weak. Come on, y'all. Come on. Let's make this last one really count. It's Friday night. It is Friday, right? Okay, all right, all right. They're like, yes, it's Friday. Okay, all right. Hello. That's good. I'll take it. I'll take it. I want to acknowledge all of you. I want to acknowledge your families and those that support you. I want to acknowledge the faculty and staff and leadership of this institution. I want to acknowledge the indigenous peoples of this land. I want to acknowledge this moment in time and say thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Michelle Chapman. I am from Washington, D.C., and it really is a delight to be here. What we're going to do this evening is explore how mindfulness and contemplative practices more broadly constructed, can support our efforts in advancing youth development, overall development, youth justice, well-being, not just for young folks, but for all of us. So we've done a little introduction. So this is all, this has been mentioned already, where I got my degrees, American University in Washington, D.C. I'm a research fellow in one of RWJF's 4 leadership programs. I just completed a year-long experience with Transformative Educational Leadership, which is an incredible program. If any of you are teaching or planning to be teachers, you may want to consider it. It's a 1-year online experience with 2 in-person retreats around transforming education through mindfulness and social emotional learning. I sit on the board of the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society and the Mindfulness and Education Network, and I facilitate mindfulness activities and contemplative activities on my campus. I also love Earth, Wind, and Fire. Anybody know about Earth? Okay, yes, of course, yes. Love to sing, love to dance, love to cut up. I also want to honor my angels. My mom, Barbara Jordan, who's over there on the right. My elder, Audrey Brown. She was one of my professors in undergrad. And my life turned out the way it did because basically I did what Dr. Brown told me to do. She was an anthropologist. And she said, you need to go to graduate school. I said, okay. And I went to graduate school. She said, you need to go travel a little bit. I said, okay. Audrey Brown was from New York. She did not play. And so maybe some of you have that kind of person in your life. When they give you advice, you don't question it a lot. You're like, this sounds like good advice. I'm just going to do it. I met a guy. I was late 30s. She said, you need to go on and get married before you get old and nobody wants you. She put it just like that, right? I said, okay, I'll do that. And then she said, you need to just go on and have a kid because now you're really getting old. She's all my business, right? Okay. But it was really sound advice. It turned out okay. So I honor her because she was more than a professor. She was a mentor and a friend, and she gave really good advice. And then my spiritual mother, who is from Trinidad, who has also crossed over, Ianifa Efunyale Ifarinola, Mother Pamela Taylor. They watch over me, they guide me, they bless me, and I'm really grateful. So we're going to jump right in. Contemplative practices and pedagogy. It's a bumpy word, right? Contemplative, contemplative, contemplative. What are those things? They are practices that cultivate a critical first-person awareness. They help us know more about ourselves when we engage in these practices. These practices can consist of rituals, mindfulness, meditation, walking meditation, gardening, yoga, all number of practices. I spoke with some students today in the Cesar Chavez Center, and I learned that going to raves is a contemplative practice for a student. I learned all about raves. Ask me anything. I know about the candy and the bracelets and I know all about that now. Driving as a contemplative practice, just being in nature was a wonderfully educational experience. Reflective writing, a range of activities that can deepen our awareness of ourselves and deepen our connection to ourselves, deepen our connection with others, and even deepen our learning around certain subjects. These practices can also support us in coming together as a human community and as a world. Why do these practices matter? Well, they matter because when we look at the state of the world, when we look at the challenges facing us, we understand that it's going to take some big work, some big effort to transform and transcend some of these challenges. And we have to be connected as a human family in order to do that. And so increasingly in K-12 education and certainly in higher education, faculty members, staff, students are engaging in contemplative practices. They're integrating practices into their teaching, into their advising, to support students, to support learners, to support the cultivation of community, to support self-awareness, to support global awareness. So the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society holds regular events. We have an annual summer session where educators from around the globe come together, and it's like college for college professors. We stay in dorms, and we have our meals together, and we have classes and workshops, and we learn how to deepen our contemplative practices, our personal practices, and also how to develop them more fully for our work with students. We also have an annual conference, and it's just a really wonderful time. So we engage in art and writing and journaling and practice together, and it's really transforming higher education. So this is the tree of contemplative practices, and you should have some on the tables in front of you, excuse me. And I want to invite you to take a look at the tree and see if there are any practices there that you engage in that support you in your daily life, in your journey. Are there things on the tree that you engage in that help you feel centered, that help you regulate yourself, that help you focus? As you'll notice, the root of the tree is communion, community, communication. And then we have various branches coming off of the tree. Stillness practices, generative practices, movement-based practices, relational practices. Take a moment and look at that tree and see if there's anything there that speaks to you or resonates with you. And I'd love to hear if there is anything that resonates with you on that tree. Is anyone willing to share? Thank you. Music. Anyone else? Now, you know I came from Washington, D.C. Now, you know my flight was at 7 a.m. You know there's a 2-hour time difference, right? I know you have to be nice to your guests. At least you're supposed to be nice to your guests, right? So I know that you know this and you're going to participate and make me feel so good, so when I go back to D.C., I can say, oh, those students at UNC, they were on it. So who else has a contemplative practice they'd like to shout out and share with us? Yes. Volunteering over here, thank you. Journaling. Music, volunteering, journaling. What else we got? Great, maybe there's something that you engage in that is not on the tree. There are some empty spaces on the tree. What would you put there? What is the practice that you turn to? No matter how weird you think it sounds, it doesn't. It's not weird. What are the practices that you turn to help you feel centered, stable, grounded, restored? Cross-country skiing. Not something that happens in D.C. Wonderful. So there are a whole range of practices that we can engage in. Anybody do mindfulness? Anyone do yoga? Anybody garden? Spend time in nature? Yeah. Anybody have a pet? Walk a dog or just stroke your cat? Anybody crochet or knit? Any artists in the room? What happened when I asked all you for ideas? Right? Everybody's quiet, right? Okay. Anybody do gaming? You know, okay? All right. A number of things, wonderful things that can support us. There's been a lot of research on the impact and the benefit of mindfulness in the college environment. We consider mindfulness a contemplative practice. It's a type of contemplative practice that has to do with bringing our full attention and awareness to the present moment, being fully engaged, fully present to our experience. But it's more than the mind. It's the mind and the body. It's the heart. It's all of that, being connected, integrated, and fully aware. I don't know about you, but sometimes I show up for class and I'm just not quite there. I'm making a grocery list. I'm planning a meeting. I'm grading some papers in my head, right? Anybody have that experience where you show up for class, but you're not fully there for class? Yeah, maybe just a couple of you. Your professors are here, so I understand. Kind of keep it on the DL. Well, research tells us now that that is one of the factors in stress and anxiety. When we are not fully present to the moment, when we're ruminating, when we're repeating a negative experience in our head again and again, or when we're just not fully there, we can keep ourselves in a state of stress and in a state of fight or flight or freeze. And so mindfulness has been explored as a way to bring all of our attention and awareness into the moment without judgment, with gentle awareness. It's being present and aware of what's happening right here and right now, holding it with gentleness, not getting into a story about it, not beating yourself up about it, but just being aware. And it's a really powerful practice, and it takes on a number of forms, a number of ways that we can engage in mindfulness. We can do mindful walking. We can have a seated meditation. We can do mindful journaling. I am trying with everything within me to be mindful as I deliver this presentation to you this evening. Being present, being aware, being with you, as well as tending to my own interior. I wonder if I could convince you to do a very quick mindfulness practice this evening. Are you up for it? Yeah? Are you up for it, really? Oh, yes. Okay. So this is an invitation. And just as someone would invite you to a party that maybe you're not too sure about, oh, know those people, right? You can decline. Or you could say, you know what, I'm going to try it out. See what happens, right? So this is an invitation. So if you're so inclined, I'd like to invite you to sit up nice and tall in your seat. Make sure your spine is in a line and that your feet are nice and planted on the floor. You can put your hands in your lap. Yes, your professors are watching. You're all doing a good job. You can put your hands on your lap or at your side, whatever feels comfortable for you. You can close your eyes if you'd like, or you can just lower your eyes and hold a really soft gaze, not focusing on anything in particular. I want to invite you to take a nice deep breath in through the nose. Inhale nice and deep. Bring that air down to the diaphragm. And push that air out through the nose. Once more, a nice, long, deep breath in through the nose. And out. Another breath in through the nose. This time as you exhale, drop your shoulders. Allow them to fall away from your ears. Resume your normal breathing pattern. And just notice how your body feels right now, without judgment. Notice where your mind is right now. Maybe deep in thought, trying to figure this out. How long will this last? It's okay. Just notice. Notice where your breath is right now. Is it relaxed and easy? Shallow? We're just noticing. Now bring your awareness to your feet. Just notice your feet on the floor. The feeling of groundedness. Bring your awareness to your knees. Continue to breathe and notice if there's any tension, any tightness. Bring your awareness to your belly. Notice any sensations. Bring your awareness to your heart. bring your awareness to your head. Release the wrinkle in your brow. Relax your jaw. You are here. Take another deep breath in through the nose and out. Slowly open your eyes or lift your gaze. Who feels sleepy? Who could take a nap right now? Yes. Was that okay? Research has shown that if you engage in a practice like that on a consistent basis, it doesn't have to be long. You don't have to do it for months at a time. You can improve your well-being. And this is really important because the levels of stress and anxiety and depression among college students today is through the roof. And universities are struggling to meet the need and to tend to the mental wellness needs of students, faculty, and staff as well. So if there's a practice that you can do, whether it's mindfulness like this or whether it looks like something a bit different, I urge you to do something for yourselves to support your well-being. So, across America, children say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, although they don't have to. And I wonder, really, if they should. Because in that pledge, there's language around loyalty to liberty and justice for all people. But what we see in the area of youth justice and juvenile justice is that this does not exist for a lot of young people. What we're seeing is the criminalization of youth behavior, especially youth of color, and it's extremely problematic. And so I wonder what it really means to pledge allegiance and to pledge commitment to values that are really not being exercised or realized by many of today's young people. So I want to share a bit with you today about the work that I do in the area of youth justice and what I think youth justice is. So for me, it's not juvenile justice. And it doesn't begin when a young person has committed an offense, if you will. It doesn't begin there. It begins actually well before their birth. Because for me, youth justice is about having the opportunity to fully thrive, to manifest your potential, to have all of your needs met, and to completely and fully participate in our democracy. And many young people don't have that. They don't have justice. And so I want to talk just a bit about that today. Too many children today are being criminalized at increasingly younger ages and subjected to the juvenile justice system or even the adult criminal justice system. Can you all hear me okay? Great, thank you. This is particularly true for children who are poor, children of color, children with disabilities or with mental health and substance abuse challenges, children facing neglect, abuse, or violence, children in foster care, children who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. These children are disproportionately pushed out of schools and pulled into an unjust system through arrests and incarceration, which exacerbates harm and increases the risk of abuse. More than 1 million children were arrested in the United States in 2014, and approximately 856,000 children were arrested in 2016, according to preliminary estimates. Although youth arrests and incarceration have been decreasing overall, Over 48,000 children were incarcerated on an average night in 2015, and the proportion of justice-involved girls has been increasing. Moreover, racial disproportionality remains, and it gets worse as children of color go deeper in the system, from the point of arrest to post-adjudication placement. 2,363 children are arrested each day in America, 1 every 37 seconds. That is alarming, and that is disturbing. So what do we do about it? James Bell is the director of the Haywood Institute for Youth and Family Justice. And he writes about and talks about, his center does work around this issue of racial disparities in the justice system, disproportionate minority contact. And what I really appreciate about Mr. Bell's work is that he looks at these things within their historical context. We have to understand and we have to address this issue of racial disparities in the justice system by looking at our history, by understanding that many of our systems and laws and institutions were constructed around ideas of white supremacy or white superiority and the inferiority of other peoples, basically everyone else. And so these beliefs, these ideas are enshrined, if you will, and inscribed into our entire cultural system. And until we do some real work at dismantling that, at examining that, at challenging those notions, and helping us understand how we are all racialized beings and live out a racial narrative, we won't make a lot of inroads in changing some of these statistics. So my work rests at the intersection of mindfulness and contemplative approaches and youth justice, preventing youth engagement in the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system, by examining conditions in communities and in schools, by offering services and looking at research that supports contemplative, restorative approaches that change the way we teach, that change the way we see youth of color, poor youth, sexual minority youth, youth for whom English is not their first language, indigenous youth. My work exists at that intersection and has a lot to do with challenging and disrupting racial norms or racial ideas, if you will. And I think that contemplative practices and mindfulness can really support us in doing this work. But let me help you understand the landscape a bit more as a Black woman and as a woman who is a mother, a godmother, an auntie to Black children and Black youth. Yale did a study to examine hidden bias among teachers. And they asked teachers to look at a video of children. Anybody familiar with this study? Look at a video of children. 2 Black children, a girl and a boy, 2 white children, a girl and a boy. And they said to look for the problem children in the room. Well, these kids were actors, and there really weren't any problem children in the room. Their behavior was about the same. But by using eye-tracking technology, they found that teachers overwhelmingly looked at Black males. They focused their attention on Black males. And of course, they had already, been prompted in some ways, right? And this was true for white teachers and Black teachers. Because we have this sort of cultural narrative. There's this story out there that Black boys and Black males are threatening, they're problematic, they're a danger, they're disruptive in the classroom, they don't know how to act. And because that narrative is so looming, because that myth is so looming, we look for that. And it actually impacts how Black children are experienced and seen in the classroom. Black children make up about 17% of all the kids in preschool across this country. Yet they comprise about 48% of preschool suspensions. Number one, why are kids getting suspended from preschool? Let's look at that, right? And then why are Black children making up almost half of the preschool suspensions across the country? It's so alarming that the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education issued a paper and some work around that and said, we've got to look at that. This is not just. Something is happening here. This is a study that showed that Black boys as young as 10 are viewed as being older and more threatening than white boys, white males of the same age, and that their encounters with the police often turn violent and sometimes deadly, as we have seen, because of how they are perceived. These perceptions don't come out of anywhere. They're a part of our history. They're a part of our racialization in this country. Dr. Monique Morris's work is very much a mirror to the work that's happening with Black boys. And she talks about how Black girls are pushed out of schools for wearing natural hair, for asking questions or being perceived as challenging or threatening their teacher's directives by disagreeing with a teacher, right? And so what she talks about is the constant negotiation and navigation that Black girls have to do in schools around these normalized ideas of femininity, and how this can sometimes, oftentimes, produce a very negative experience in schools. And we understand that Black girls are a growing population in the juvenile justice system. Before I go there, I want to also say that there was a study done, I think it was at Georgetown University, that showed Black girls as young as 5. It's called Girlhood Interrupted. That's the study. Girls as young as 5, Black girls as young as 5, are perceived as being older, more knowledgeable about sex and drugs and other behavior than white girls of the same age. And we know that perception sometimes becomes reality. So if educators, if youth workers, if police officers, if social workers, if criminal justice professionals have this unexamined perception around children of color, Black children and other children, we have to interrogate that, because it could very well be manifesting in the ways that they serve these children or disserve these children. And so to me, all of that constitutes the dehumanization of Black youth. And this is not a new concept either. And other youth groups, other groups of young people are also dehumanized in our system. They're not seen as being fully human. They're not given the benefit of the doubt. They're seen as guilty, as offenders, as problems. And in many ways, in subtle ways and in very explicit ways, children are written off. So how can critical contemplative pedagogy support this examination of the way young people are treated and the narratives around youth and youth of color, so-called minority youth? Well, contemplative approaches like mindfulness and other practices can support us in not only our individual well-being in terms of lowering our blood pressure and producing the production of good hormones in our body to make us feel good and to manage our mood. It can also support us in examining our hidden biases and assumptions and perceptions. And this is the work that is growing and that I find actually very attractive. Because there's so much literature and there's so much research on mindfulness in particular, because contemplative practices are so broad. There's a lot more research on mindfulness. It's really being seen as good medicine, if you will. And we understand that it is not new medicine. It is a way of life for many people around the world. And all peoples have their contemplative approaches, whether that's being with family, being in nature, or doing a formal seated meditation, right? But I believe if we are not applying some of our best medicine and best approaches for health and well-being and thriving to issues of injustice, then we're really not doing our work we're really not doing anything, right? We're navel gazing. We're just uplifting or maintaining the status quo. So there's a body of work and there are a body of critical scholars who are saying, let's use these approaches to interrogate injustice, to help us all examine the thoughts and the perceptions and the behaviors, the things that are blind to us, right? And how they show up in our lives. So critical contemplative approaches, for me, has to do with using these ways of being, using these practices to transform internalized, institutional, societal, and global injustice and oppression. It's compatible with critical race theory, gender, sexuality, and feminist studies, culturally responsive pedagogy, anti-oppressive pedagogy, decolonial frameworks. And so I think it really holds some value for us. So what this looks like in the classroom. In my restorative justice class, and I teach at a university that is predominantly African American, is our state school in Washington, D.C. We have an enrollment of about 4,000 students, most of them first-generation students, most of them D.C. residents. In my restorative justice class, we may engage in a mindfulness practice just to allow students to show up because they're working, they've got families, they're caring for parents and elders, and they may not be fully available or fully present to their learning, right? So we begin often with a practice so that they can fully show up. And hopefully they can also realize the benefits of that and how they can begin to use that practice even in their daily experience when they're outside of class, right? In that class, I have students dedicate their learning to someone. It could be someone for whom they think they should have received justice. It could be someone that we've read about or heard about in the media whom we think was treated unjustly or unfairly. It could be someone in their class or someone in their family. And so we do this dedication and we create a wall of honor. And we'll bring in a photo or just write that person's name on a wall, on a paper on a wall. We're not writing on the walls at school. Not doing that. Writing it on a paper and just pasting it on a wall. And what that does is it helps students remember that their learning is not just about them. And as we go through the semester, we examine, okay, who are you dedicating your learning to? Okay, we're learning about circle processes. We're learning about equity of voice through restorative circles. We're learning about all of these concepts. How does that apply to Trayvon Martin? How does that apply to Sandra Bland? How does that apply to my brother who was killed at 17 years old on his way home from school from a movie date? Right? What would justice look like for those individuals using this information we're learning about restorative justice? It can look like that. It can also look like in the real world or in the professional world, training with educators and social workers and counselors around their own hidden biases. So we use the practices because the practices help ground us. They help fuel us. It's not easy to talk about injustice. It's not easy to talk about race and racism. It's not easy to talk about oppression and supremacy and privilege and power and all of these things. They're very uncomfortable. So we have to develop the capacity to hold those conversations so that people will stay in the room or stay engaged in the conversation. And we can learn and exchange without guilt, shame, or blame. We can learn and exchange with responsibility and a commitment to moving forward and transforming systems, structures, policies, and practices that perpetuate harm. Like when we rely on suspension and expulsion as a way to discipline kids in schools, which puts them in direct contact with the justice system. And as we know, when a child is suspended from school just one time, it significantly increases their chances of dropping out of school altogether because they fall behind academically, they fall behind socially, they're out there in the world without supervision, without community, without connection, and they themselves can become victims and vulnerable because they're not in school. School, even with some of its challenges, is still the #1 protective factor for kids. It's the best place for them to be. So critical contemplative pedagogy examines how we move through these systems. It begins with self-inquiry. What are my intentions? Because even, my grandmother used to say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So you can be well-intentioned about some things and still very much steeped in your own ideas of supremacy, right? So it begins with self-inquiry. Why am I offering this? Early in my career, when I began looking into mindfulness practices, I was really troubled because, quite frankly, many of the programs that were offering practices in poor schools, urban schools with black and brown students were not black and brown people. And I wondered, what is this about? It felt to me like folks were going through a savior complex, right? Let me swoop down in the school and teach these kids how to regulate and manage themselves better. Well, that's very limited. When you have policies and teachers who haven't examined their own bias and how it comes out in their teaching, when you have families and communities that have not been invested in, when there's gentrification in communities, where there's tensions between police officers and community members, it's not just about teaching kids how to breathe and regulate their emotions. There's more work that needs to be done. And I know that we all have our work to do, and maybe for some of us that work stops at teaching practices or yoga to kids in schools. But I think my role is to say, I want you to step up and do a bit more. How can we change some of these structures and systems so kids are not coming to school traumatized? So kids are not coming to school with this high level of need because their communities haven't been invested in, because their parents can't get a job, because their parents are afraid they'll be deported. So it begins with self-inquiry, and then we have to look at trauma-informed practices because many of us have experienced trauma, and for some groups they're more susceptible to trauma, like individuals who do not have who lack the documentation to be in this country. They are more susceptible to trauma because they have to take a certain type of work. And that puts them at risk of being harmed. That puts them at risk in a number of ways that others, we don't face that kind of risk. Practices need to be culturally relevant for the populations that we're offering them to. And some of the kids I've worked with, they do not want to close their eyes. They do not want to do yoga unless it's trap yoga. I learned something else new. Trap yoga? What? Okay. As long as it's clean, I can tolerate it. Okay? So, culturally relevant practices, practices that come from young people themselves, not always brought to people, but allowing young people the opportunity to explore what are the things that you do that make you feel centered and grounded, that return you to a sense of stability and centeredness and power, right? And then those practices and those approaches, of course, need to look at social justice, and they need to be systems focused. And why is that important? Because in addition to laptops, books, and cell phones, all of these things exist in the educational environment. Racism, hidden bias, internalized oppression, imposter syndrome, colorism, dominant and subordinate identities, adverse childhood experiences, poverty, economic marginalization, supremacy, fragility, and yes, promise and opportunity and hope and intrigue and curiosity. Those things also exist, but we don't have to, manage those things so much. But these things we have to manage and we have to tend to. And so as individuals who will soon be going out into the world or who will be going to graduate school and law school and doing research and impacting policy, impacting laws and how we work with young people in the justice system, how we treat kids in schools and in community organizations. It's important for all of us to be aware of this and to have the tools and to have the capacity to engage around these ideas. I'm really inspired by the work of Ruth King, who writes about mindfulness and race. I'm also very much inspired by the work of Rhonda McGee, who has a new book about the inner work of racial justice. Yes, Incredible, incredible work. And so many other scholars who see things the way I see them, right? That we've got to apply these internal skills and tools to really transforming society by really examining race and the myriad forms of oppression. Because it's time for truth-telling and healing, because we all have been impacted by racism. For some of us, it may not be as apparent, or we may not be as aware of it, but we all have been impacted in some way. So some of the approaches I use in my class, how much time do I have, Mike? Some of the approaches I use in my class: affirmation, storytelling, jazz mindfulness. I have a few pieces I play by John Coltrane, Ahmad Jamal, and others. You know, that's what I like. Students sometimes come with the things that they like, and I might be open to it sometimes. Right? Elder and ancestor reverence, which I think is so incredibly important, right? To help students stay connected to their elders. Maybe, it may not be people in their family. Could be people in their community. But what I also find is that students have such a feeling of isolation in college. And in academia, you know, even as professors, this work is very much oriented around existing in silos and publishing, you know, single author works and just being in putting your head down, doing your research and getting your stuff done. It can be very alienating and isolating and not healthy. And so I follow a West African spiritual tradition, and we honor our ancestors. We say prayers for them. We sometimes fix meals and put a plate of food to the side for them. We talk to them as if they are here, because we believe that they are, right? And so I think it's really powerful when you invite students to consider the people in their community that support them. Who are your elders? Who are your ancestors? We do touchstone meditations, vision boards, the Ori and Me Ashe practice that we'll do tomorrow. Who's coming to the workshop tomorrow? It's okay, you can lie to me, I don't care. Yay! Black youth visualization. I do this in professional development sessions, so not just with students, but also with educators and professionals that work with students. I invite them to create a grand vision for a Black youth in their mind. And sometimes this is troubling for folks, right? And then we examine, what are those barriers? Why is that difficult? Can we even envision a Black child being successful, healthy, thriving, and free? Can we envision a Black young person being liberated? What does that look like? Reflective journaling and lots of other practices. So these approaches, I believe, must be critical. It mandates that we have an understanding of historical and structural oppression and injustice. They must be consistent. We must engage in these practices with regularity. We must have the courage to step up when there is injustice happening around us, when there are things that are being said or things that are being done to perpetuate oppression and injustice. So we have to step into our courage, but we also can step into our compassion, right? I've heard this expression, we don't have to call people out, but we can call them into community. We can call them into conversation. You know, I didn't like that thing that you said. I wonder if we can talk about that. You know, I'd really like to understand your ideas. But what did you mean when you said that? I noticed that you tend to respond to this particular person or people like this in a particular way, and I'm just really curious about that. I wonder if you'd partner with me and we explore that a bit. But you can't do that from a place of, I tried it, right? For many years, I was, right? I was mad, angry. I still am, but I can hold that anger in a different way, and it's because of my practice. It's because of my values and the work that I do every day. And it's because I know this is bigger than me. And we can engage in hard conversations and deal with hard things without personalizing it, right? And without shaming and guilting each other. But we can and we must step into responsibility. We have to be responsible. So really quickly, this is the study that I'm doing with my colleagues. It's called Youth Mind Mindfulness Integration for Nonviolence Development. We've developed this curriculum around restorative justice. It's got a lot of stuff in it, like Dr. Terranova says, a lot of words, a lot of stuff there, right? Restorative, I heard you, I heard every word. Restorative justice and mindfulness and contemplative approaches and arts and equity and just a lot of different things, right? The thinking behind that, the logic model in a nutshell, is if we, because of our systems and our history and so much other stuff, sometimes I think our young people have forgotten how to be in community with one another. And they've forgotten how to have respect and compassion and dialogue with each other. And so we ground our work in the principles and practices of restorative justice, because that's really about community and relationships, right? And so as we do that, we teach teenagers about mindfulness and the brain and how trauma and stress and violence impacts their development and their ability to think rationally and logically, and how it just jacks their whole nervous system up, right? And then we allow them to give voice to some of the things they're experiencing in their own lives, the inequities and also the joys and the hopes and the dreams through spoken word and poetry and drama. And then we have them partner with college students at UDC so they can see some other possibilities for themselves, right? They can develop some relationships, because we know that just one consistent adult in your life, just one mentor, and that could be you all, just a consistent positive adult in a kid's life, can change the trajectory of their life. That's kind of what Dr. Audrey Brown did for me. She told me to go to graduate school. She said, take all the money you've got saved up and go to graduate school. Now, I don't think she knew I only had $500 saved up. That's not getting you a graduate school education anywhere, but I did it because she told me to. So you're not the only ones with student loans. It's all good, right? And so that's our model. So we'll be piloting this intervention later this semester. Wish me luck. Think about me when I cross your mind. Just give me a fist pump or breathe for me, take a breath for me, right? We did a quick feasibility trial last summer, and we learned a lot from the young people, including, the trap yoga, just all sorts of wonderful things. But what really drove home for us is that young people are really stressed, and they faced a lot of trauma, and they need a lot of guidance and advice, and they want to understand how this stuff affects them. So it's not just for the adults to understand. They want to understand their brain. They want to understand their nervous system. They want to be empowered with this knowledge and with this language, and we want to do that also. And just another quick shameless plug. I've started offering a Black Mindfulness Summit. And this sort of gets into a bit of what I'll talk about tomorrow around decolonizing mindfulness, and how we can examine other cultural frames as a starting place for viewing, exploring, and engaging in contemplative mindfulness practices. And how also in mixed mindfulness spaces, as I call them, those things that I pointed to before, the racism, the colorism, and all of that, the cultural appropriation, it happens in those spaces as well, unfortunately. But they go unexamined. And so the Black Mindfulness Summit is really oriented around Black or African diasporic practices. It's oriented around mindfulness research on Black communities, scholarship, and how Black scholars and artists and healers and activists are engaging in practices for their own well-being, and how they're promoting these practices for healing, justice, and joy for themselves and for the communities they serve. So if you want to come down to the DC area later on in April, be in touch with me about the Black Mindfulness Summit. I'm really excited about it. And I've got a lot of colleagues in higher ed who need a space like this. And while it is a selective space, what I'm hoping is that it will inspire others to create the kinds of mindfulness and contemplative spaces that you need. Because not all communities serve all needs. And sometimes we have to create that thing for ourselves that we need. That was supposed to be the other slide, but that's the youth mind model. I already talked about that. So those are just the key points to our approach that we'll be testing a bit later this summer. I want you to remember, please, self-care. We often think about self-care when we are already burnt out and, barely making it, right? I know, that was good, right? I got your attention. He's like, what's happening over there? Right? But I don't want you to think about self-care when you're at the end of your rope. Think about self-care as a continuous dialogue, a conversation oriented around two questions. How do I feel? And what do I need? How do I feel? And what do I need? I'm drained. I'm lonely. I'm tired. I feel conflicted. I feel blocked, right? And then how do I meet that need? Because you cannot pour from an empty cup. You can't be there for your friends. You can't even be there for yourself if you're drained and if you're depleted. You can't rise up and give your professors what they're expecting from you if you are depleted. So really quickly, one more practice. You up for it? Because then I'm going to get off the mic. Yeah, everybody's up for that? Yeah, no shame, and no shade. This is a loving kindness meditation. And with loving kindness, we just cultivate feelings of generosity and basic goodness towards ourselves and towards others. You can close your eyes, you don't have to, but I want to invite you to repeat these phrases to yourself silently. First, 2 deep breaths, please. In through the nose and out through the mouth or the nose. Settle those shoulders and relax. You got through it. You didn't die. We survived. It's Friday night. May I be happy in my own mind. Say that to yourself. May I be happy in my own mind. May I be healthy in my body. May I be healthy in my body. May I feel good about myself. May I feel good about myself. May I give and receive appreciation. May I give and receive appreciation. Bring someone to mind that you love very much. A parent, a friend, a child, a pet, a loved one. And offer them this loving kindness. May you be happy in your own mind. May you be healthy in your body. May you feel good about yourself. May you give and receive appreciation. One more deep breath. There are lots of variations of the loving kindness meditation or metta. I invite you to find one that works for you and offer yourself some loving kindness with regularity. These are some of the scholars that I read. There's so many more. People who are writing on decolonizing mindfulness, mindfulness in social justice, mindfulness in trauma, just incredible people. There's lots of great work being done in this field right now that I'm really excited about, and I'm really excited about Dr. Kimball's new center, and it's just going to be amazing and bring so much to this institution. I might have to come back here. Email me if you have any questions. I'd love to hear some of them now, or if you just want to tell me how wonderful I am and how much fun you had. I'll let your professors know if you do. So, any questions, anybody? Comments? You can clap for me. Go on, go on. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I mentioned it earlier today. Have any of you seen this footage? Yeah. So it takes place in Florida. There's a 6-year-old child, and she has, she's having a rough day. She's having a tantrum. And apparently she struck out against some students and a few teachers. And so the school calls the police because the policy is that's what you do. And when we see the video, when it opens up, the school resource officer is reading to her and using this really lovely, wonderful language like, okay, sweetie pie, and then the police walk in the room. Okay, so first you've got this whole arrangement where the child has completely de-escalated. She seems okay. She's engaging with an adult that she probably trusts. There's this energy of warmth and safety with that adult, and then a police officer walks in. And they bring out zip ties because her wrists are too small for handcuffs. And with all of the 6-year-old wonder, she said, "What are those for?" And the officer says, "They're for you." And she breaks down. She's crying, "I don't want to go in the police car. Don't take me. Give me another chance," she says. This is a 6-year-old African-American girl, not a hardened criminal, a child. And she's asking for another chance. She is escorted out of the school. She is crying. Her parents have not been informed. The camera is on her face. We can see her face. What about her identity? It's not protected. She's put in a police car. She's hysterical. "I don't want to go with the police. I don't want to go with the police." Many of us know that lots of communities do not have great relationships with the police. Many of us know that the police were created to do exactly that, right? To police African people during the period of enslavement. So why is this happening? This is a great opportunity for examining policies and practices and institutions that harm kids. And maybe they don't mean to, but that doesn't excuse you because you're harming kids. So yes, it's very disturbing. And it happens often, happens a lot. So what a critical approach, a critical contemplative approach would look like in that instance is some professional development, some examination of policies, and professional development around how to appropriately engage with children, and a real exploration of, are these practices helpful? Is it helpful to have school resource officers? Do we need to develop another response when kids are acting out like this? Because in my mind, a kid that is lashed out at students and teachers too, they need some help. Something's happening there. Maybe they need some counseling, or maybe something's happening in the family. Maybe they need some structure. Something is going on. What that child does not need is to be removed from her school without her parents, in zip ties, criminalized. Criminalized. Yeah. Comments or questions? Yes.
Following that, so I'm very interested in making an impact and kind of deconstructing the racial framework that we have in our country.
Hmm?
But my biggest fear is that I unintentionally or unconsciously bring in that the savior complex,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering how I can possibly step back from that.
Mm-hmm. I would say to just remember that you have been affected by the racial narrative as well. And as you are serving and outward facing, remember to continue to do the inner work and decide which community you want to do that work in and among. It may be very powerful. I'm just gonna, can I just be frank with y'all? We need white men doing this work with white men. We really do. Because of the racial structure, it's challenging for white men to hear this from me. You stand a better chance, right? So thinking about the communities that you want to do this work within, and continuing to do the work yourself. And I think, being reflexive and being reflective and always examining the self is really helpful, and having a community that you do this work with. You don't need to go out alone. Right. This is community work. This is collective work. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yes. Well, honey, I have decided, now I'm a few years older than you, not a lot, just a few. I've decided that it's pointless to waste my breath and my energy on people who don't want to listen. I'll engage a bit, but I'm going to go further down the road with folks who do want to listen and who want to engage. Even if they don't know this, if they're a little bit curious about it, if they think it might hold some truth or something, I'm going to spend more of my energy on that side. Because it's just a better investment of my time. Yeah. It's challenging to convince people otherwise. And I've decided that it's not my work. There are some folks who do that work, and I support them, I applaud them, but that's not mine. So you may make a similar choice. Yeah. Thanks for that question. How about one from this side of the room? Just make something up, and then maybe you can leave. Yes, wonderful. That is so inspirational. My workshop is at, what time, Mike? Dr. Kimball? 12:30. 12:30. And we'll be examining the Yoruba concepts of Ori, which is this notion that we all have a divine self, and that divine self is within our head. The head is sacred in the Yoruba religion. Emi, which means breath, and the heart, and Ashe, the power to make things happen, the touch of the divine in every living thing, plants, animals, people, everything has Ashe. So we're going to do some stuff around that. It's going to be fun. I'm going to look really cute. So I want you to come. Thank you all so very much. I have enjoyed being here, and I'm glad I get to stay for another day and a half. I felt very welcome. Thank you all very much. And thank you for being here on a Friday night. Give it up for yourselves. And thank you also to the viewers.
There is a conference tomorrow morning. We have required registration because there's food at this conference, and if we have too many people, we can't feed all the mouths. But if you're leaning towards wanting to learn more about this, attending Dr. Chapman's luncheon, crash it. We'll make it work. Thank you, everybody, for coming.